For this lesson, we're going to start multiplying using the distributive property. This one is very similar to what we just did using the area model, except when we're multiplying using the distributive property, we don't necessarily have to draw our rectangle. If you were a huge fan of the area model, keep using it. This is just another strategy, another way that we can multiply. We're going to talk about quite a few ways that we can multiply over the course of this chapter. So let's take a look at multiplying using the distributive property. And we're going to first start out with the area model and work our way into distributive property. Here we have the problem 7 times 35. Yesterday, when we used the area model, we started by drawing a rectangle, so that's what we're going to start with for this. Again, make sure that you have some paper in front of you, and I want you to be working these problems out with me. Now, the second step for our area model was to expand our number. So we took 35, and we would have expanded this to 30 plus 5. Then we would label our rectangle 7, 30, and 5. And we would go ahead and we would write our multiplication problems inside. 7 times 30, 7 times 5. We would solve for our partial product. 7 times 30 is 210. 7 times 5 is 35. And then we would add to find our final product. 210 plus 35. And our answer would be 245. Now, what we're going to be doing is very similar to this, and I'm going to show you on the same screen so that you can see the difference between the area model and the distributive property. If you are a fan of the area model and you're not a fan of the distributive property, that's okay. It's okay to find something and stick with that. I have no issue with that, but I do want to expose you to other ways that you can multiply. So let's take a look at the distributive property. I'm just going to draw a little squiggly line here, and we're going to start off with our problem 7 times 35 on this side. Now we're going to follow very similar steps. Our first step is going to be to expand our number 35. So our 7 and our multiplication sign is going to stay the same. Then we're going to draw a parentheses, and we're going to expand 35 into 30 plus 5. And we're going to close our parentheses. Now what we're going to do is distribute or take our 7 and multiply it times 30 and our 7 and multiply it times 5. And I want to show you what we get when we do that. When we multiply 7 times 30, doesn't that look very familiar to what we see over here on our area model side? And then we're going to have an addition sign between them, and we're going to multiply 7 times 5. Which is exactly the same as we have on this side in our area model. Now we're going to go ahead and multiply to find our partial products. Here we get 210 plus 35. Again, this is exactly the same as our area model. We got the same exact partial products, 210 and 35. Our last step is going to be to add 210 plus 35, and we get 245, which is exactly the same as we got using our area model. This method over here is called expanded form, or we're really using the distributive property to break our number apart and distribute our 7 into our 30 and our 5, but we get the same answer. So if you're a fan of this area model, stick with it. I really love the visualization of this. If you like just the numbers and you don't like drawing your rectangle and doing that, this might be a good method for you. The area model is very clean cut. Distributive property can get a little muddled sometimes, but I do want you to know how to do both. So make sure on your paper right now that you have both this area model and this distributive property method. We're going to be doing both for a little while so that you can compare the two and really find which one you like the best. Okay, for our next problem, we have 8 times 27, and we're going to start off and we're going to do the area model and the distributive property at the same time. So I'm going to draw my rectangle over on the left side of my screen for my area model, and I'm going to rewrite my problem over here on the right side. Now our first step for either of these problems is to expand our number 27. So 27 in expanded form is 20 plus 7, and that's going to help me separate out my rectangle into 8 on one side, 27. Over here in my distributive property form or expanded form, I'm going to take my 8, that's going to stay the same, my multiplication sign, and then I'm going to expand 27 into 20 plus 7. Now my next step in my area model would be to write my multiplication problems. 8 times 20 and 8 times 7. And I'm going to do the same over here in my expanded form or distributive property form. 8 times 20 plus 8 times 7. I'm taking my 8 and I'm distributing it inside of my parentheses. Okay. My next step is to find my partial products. 8 times 20 is 160. 8 times 7 is 56. I'm going to do the same thing on this side with my distributive property form. 8 times 20 is 160. 8 times 7 is 56. My last step on both sides is to add 160 plus 56. 160 plus 56. When I do this, I get 216. And that is my final product. On your page, make sure that you have both the area model and the distributive property way. Okay? Again, we get to the same result no matter which way we solve our problem, our area model, our distributive property. It's just a very different way for us to work our math out. Let's do one more together, and then I'm going to have you practice by yourself. Our next problem is 9 times 56. So I'm going to start on this side with our area model. We have 56 that needs to be expanded for both methods. So we're going to expand that into 50 plus 6. I'm going to write 9 times 56 over here, get it all ready. Now I'm going to label my rectangle 9, 50, and 6. I'm going to go ahead and expand in my distributive property 9 times 50 plus 6. My next step is to write my multiplication problems. 9 times 50, 9 times 6. Same thing over here. I'm distributing my 9 inside my parentheses. 9 times 50 plus 9 times 6. Now I'm going to solve for my partial products. 9 times 50 is 450. 9 times 6 is 54. I'm going to do the same thing over here. 9 times 50 is 450. 9 times 6 is 54. My final step is to add 450 plus 54, 450 plus 54, and I get 504 as my final product. Again, no matter which way I did it, I get the same answer. Just two different ways to work these problems out. My area model or my distributive property method. Go ahead and give this next problem a shot. I challenge you to use the area model and use the distributive property method. Work this problem out and find your product. Do that now. I'm already over here, so I have 37. I've expanded to 30 and 7, and my 5 is going to be on my side. Over here, I rewrote my problem. I'm now going to expand it to 5 times 30 plus 7. My next step is to write those individual multiplication problems to solve for my partial products. 5 times 30, 5 times 7. Over here, I'm going to distribute my 5 inside my parentheses. 5 times 30 plus 5 times 7. My next step is to solve for my partial products. 5 times 30 is 150. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 30 is 150. 5 times 7 is 35. My last step is to add those partial products. 150 plus 35, 150 plus 35. No matter which way I do it, I get the same answer of 185. And that is the answer to this multiplication problem, 185. Okay, give this next one a shot. Your next problem is 7 times 64. Solve this problem using the area method and the distributive property. All right, I have my area model ready and I have my distributive property ready to go. So I've already expanded my number 64. I'm going to do it here, 7 times 60 plus 4. I'm now going to distribute that 7 so I can find those two small multiplication problems, 7 times 60 and 7 times 4. I'm going to do the same thing over here, 7 times 60 plus 7 times 4. I'm going to solve those problems, 420 and 28, 420 and 28. My last step is to add my partial products, 420 plus 28, 420 plus 28, I get 448. And that is the product for this problem. I want us to take a second and take some notes so that we are sure we know how to solve both of these methods. So get a pencil and your paper. They should already be out because you should have been working these problems out, and I want us to write these notes down in our packet. Now, when we're taking notes, make sure we're pausing the video so that we can jot our notes down in our spiral notebooks. All right, I want us to write these notes down in our spiral. We're going to label this area model, and then we have 5 steps that we need to follow when we're using our area model. Step number 1 is to draw our rectangle. Step number 2 is to expand our number. Step number 3 is to label our rectangle. So we have to separate our rectangle and we have to label it. So let's say we had 3 times 21. Step number 4 is to write and solve for our partial product. So I would do 3 times 20 here and 3 times 1 here. And I would solve for those partial products. So I would get 60 and 3. And then my final step is to add my partial products together. 60 and 3 would be 63 as my final product. Write these 5 steps down in your spiral. If you need to pause the video, pause the video. Make sure you get these down in your notes. Okay, we also have some notes to take on the distributive property, so I want you to write these 5 steps down for our distributive property, and they're very similar to those that we wrote down for our area model. The first step is to write down the problem. So if we have, let's say we have 3 times 22. We did 3 times 21 on the last one. We'll do 3 times 22. Our second step is to expand our larger number. So we would expand it to 3 times 20 plus 2. Our third step is to distribute into our parentheses. So we would have 3 times 20 plus 3 times 2. Our next step would be solve for our partial products. 3 times 20 is 60. 3 times 2 is 6. And our last step is to add our partial products. 5 steps to solve for our distributive property. Make sure we take all of these notes. Again, if you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause. And we're going to end with one final question. Go ahead and write this problem down, 7 times 36, and I want you to solve and find the product. Choose a method that you want to use for this one, solve and find your product. Go. Okay, here I have 7 times 36. I've expanded 36 into 30 plus 6. 7 times 30 plus 6. My next step is to write my partial product equation. 7 times 30, 7 times 6. Over here, I'm going to distribute my 7 inside of my parentheses. 7 times 30 plus 7 times 6. I'm then going to solve for my partial products. 210, 42. Over here, I'm going to do the same thing. 210 plus 42. And my final step is to add and find my actual product. 210 plus 42 is equal to 252. Okay, you should have gotten 252 as your product. All right, check your work on that. Tomorrow, we're going to be working with bigger numbers using both the distributive property and our area model. And again, we'll look at both of them, but then figure out which method works for you. See you tomorrow.